We are live, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see everybody here. Going to talk this morning about the DC information that was given out by James Gunn. He had a lot to say this week, and there's plenty to talk about. So let's get right into it. This week, we're doing live on a Sunday morning. And we've got a very special guest with us this morning to talk about things. And that special guest is Warren. Good morning, Warren. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I got a little bit of a late start today. Things were running a little bit behind, but we're here. Got my Diet Dr. Pepper and ready to go.
Yeah, I've had something like that too.
Life happens to everybody, and sometimes it gets in the way of plans that you have set. So, but there's a lot of things happening with the DC U, as it's called nowadays. James Gunn made his announcement this week, talking about his slate of the his version of the DC cinematic universe, and I found it kind of interesting. What about yourself?
It was a 5 minute video, and it was a lot. It was very clear. I like new, but still golden age stuff. So um, I'm interested. I'm very interested, and I think he said it's an 8 year plan, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So 8-10 year plan. So I'm interested. The list was long, and yeah, I can't wait.
Well, he is definitely finishing out what's already been planned and what I consider contracted. So, oh my goodness, what is that? Oh, anyway, he's going to continue on with the Matt Reeves uh, Batman series, which is a more earthly based, grounded version of the Batman and his rogues gallery. So, he's already established the Penguin and the Catwoman and the Riddler and put a place in for the Joker. So I think a lot of those characters are going to be left out when James Gunn does his Batman. So we're probably going to see a lot more obscure characters. He seems to have a lot of fun and success by bringing out the more obscure characters and bringing them to light and having fun with them and establishing them as good characters. One of the things he noted was that this particular reset of the DC universe is going to be a little more planned out than the Marvel Cinematic Universe was when it started. And I don't think that's a fair comparison because at that point in time, everything was up in the air. Marvel had established itself as a filmmaking powerhouse by doing the Iron Man movie. However, it did find itself in a lot of debt and wound up selling itself to Disney right around that time. And all of its main characters were under contract with other studios. So they didn't have their main characters to play with. They didn't have Spider Man. They didn't have Hulk. They didn't have some of the other things that are out there now. And so they had to go with their second string characters. And Iron Man, believe it or not, was a second string character when the franchise started. So was the Black Widow. These were obscure characters that were second string and weren't part of the major MCU at the time, according to the comic books. So when he makes that comparison, they were in flux completely, making it up as they went along and trying to build something from nothing. So I think that's kind of a cheap shot for somebody who's leaving that company and moving on to another company. But what do you think?
Uh, I see where you're coming from. I think I think you're right, but I guess it's one of those like I want to prove I could do it a little bit better. You're absolutely right. Iron Man, they didn't even know how Iron Man was going to turn out, right? Like he was just. Remember, we got a Robert Downey Jr. that was coming off of like getting out of rehab, getting his stuff life together, um, and then you know afterwards, like you said, Spider Man was at Sony, X Men was with um,
Fox.
Fox, right? So was Fantastic Four. So it was a little hodgepodge of who can hit it strong. But I guess because he's seen everything and how it's transpired, how the recent phase and how DC, like the recent phase in Marvel, how that went over, and how DCEU, how that went over as well, because that didn't go out too well as ended well as he's like, okay, I see all the mistakes, so I'm gonna be better. It's a little cheap shot, but I mean, I guess when you want to market yourself, I guess you gotta do these sort of things. So um, that's how I kind of take it.
Yeah, I think probably, there's always a benefit of hindsight when it comes to the different ways of doing things. And being able to participate in the Marvel experiment and then moving over with his with that experience and knowledge over to DC is definitely a benefit. And when you have only three people that get to make the decisions, that makes it a whole lot easier. You've got James Gunn, you've got Zaslav, and you have the David guy.
And
Not
Peter,
sure.
was it Peter Safran?
Yeah, Peter Safran. That's the one I was thinking of. Sorry. So with those three in place, working together in collusion, then it should make for an easier rollout of the different films that they've got planned out. Before you had an example of too many cooks in the kitchen, and I think you know I'm I I wasn't a fan of the Snyder film, but I do think that it was a victim of too many cooks in the kitchen because he was trying to do his thing, like they told him he could do, and then they tried to rip that out from under him, and then they took advantage of a tragedy. Essentially, is what it was with the loss of his daughter. Anybody would take time away to do take care of their family at that point in time, and they used that opportunity to railroad their version of what they wanted to see because they didn't like what he was doing, and that's the truth. They really didn't like what they were seeing coming out of him, and so they took away his agency, I guess is a good way to put it. Threw in a handpicked guy who would be willing to do exactly what they say in Joss Whedon, and had him do what the studio wanted. And of course, the Justice League being a great example of that. It was horrible. It just wasn't a good movie.
It was atrocious.
Yeah. So then, of course, time passes and things happen. Not pointing any fingers at anybody for starting any sort of internet army or anything, but again, the talking heads in the studio decide that they're going to work as a committee and allow him to finish his movie and throw some more money at it and release the Snyder version of the Justice League at 4 hours long on HBO Max. And that one didn't work out as well either. Turns out their instincts were right in the first place. The,
well, well, it okay. So my thing is like it's one of those things where I'm trying to formulate it properly. These the people that like Snyder, right? They got what they wanted. I think I mentioned this on Twitter, and they got what they wanted, but then they're like, "Can we get more?" But I thought you guys just wanted the Snyder cut. Like you can't ask for more. And then you know, I broke it down on many of people's streams, such as MSK, um, and nobody's gonna sit at a movie theater for 4 hours. I don't care who you are, unless there's like an intermission where you can take like a 10 minutes to stretch, get away. Which I don't know if they're ever gonna do something like that at a movie theater. If they do, you're innovative. Um, that's never gonna happen. And then a lot of people, I think the problem with the Snyderverse is it's just you can't make every character Batman dark and gritty and I'm just gonna break your head and kill you and like Superman and then it was they got they wanted to catch up with Marvel because the Avengers made 1 billion. So like we gotta do the same. And instead of saying let's think outside of the box and do our own thing, they was like one of those like let's just cook something up together. And till this day now, since what that was what 2020,
Hmm.
they got released. Look at Twitter. They're like fire James Gunn, bring back Snyder. It's like if they had an established management and vision thoroughly planned, you wouldn't have this situation. So what I'm saying is, I think I don't know if James Gunn's gonna fail. I don't know if he's going to succeed, but I like the fact that he had a clear plan. He explained why he's picked these specific movies and shows to do, and what was the reasoning behind them. Because I mean, before that, we had a Batgirl movie that we were supposed to get, and that got canceled.
Hmm.
And like the film was already done, and they canceled it. So
Yeah, well, they
yeah,
they had to make up the money. I mean, it's the way I see it. If you have outside investments, you have to honor those investments. Otherwise, you're breaking law, and you wind up having to owe lots and lots of money. You see companies being sued all the time for breach of contract, and them being having to pay out monies in substantial amounts simply because they didn't live up to the contracts or they lied about what they were going to do. You have something that's completely in house, you can write that off. When David Zaslav took this on, he said he was going to try to get back 3 billion in and cut 3 billion from the debt that they owe, which is 53. When they took on Warner Brothers Studios, they took on 53 billion in debt. So where does that come from? That comes from internal projects being cut. That comes from removing things that are not making money and getting them to make money. So projects internally are cut. Things that were only going to be on TV that were produced by them, they can completely write off 100% on their taxes and earn that money back. And he did that. He cut a lot of stuff from Cartoon Network to HBO Max to DC, Warner Brothers Films. They stopped the presses on a lot of stuff, and it wasn't just because something was trash. That was probably part of it. Because some things were made and some things were greenlit simply not for the reasons of entertainment, but for specific agendas. And a good example of that was episode 3 of The Walking Dead, not to jump from one to the other, but it wasn't until it was well received and everybody enjoyed it and everybody liked it and they thought it was a done episode that the director comes out and says, yeah, we did that so that everybody could watch a gay romance. We tricked them into watching it. And that's the type of filmmaking that has plagued DC and Warner Brothers for many, many years now, is that the intention of the product is not the product itself and it's not the audience itself, it's the agenda behind it to put something in front of the audience so that they will find it and accept it and love it for what it is and not for the product and entertainment that it should be. So, that being said, um, certain things that are not contracted or that do have outside influences and outside investors, um, they have to put those out. So, Batgirl is out, but Matt Reeves get to continue his thing. The Flash has to be put out, but it doesn't have to have Ben Affleck in it. They can do it the way they want to and change it to where it makes more sense to them. So these are the decisions that are behind it. That it's financial and agenda driven, and not necessarily entertainment driven, which is probably what James Gunn is trying to do is refocus it on the product itself. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think with him having prior comic knowledge, because we look at like Bryan Singer, for instance, in X Men. He know nothing about the X Men. He just maybe looked at one or two comics. We've heard things like on WandaVision. I don't know if you ever watched any of Halogen Helix streams. That the director or producer, they never read Wanda or Vision or any of those characters. So I think what's good is we're getting someone that opens up a comic book, knows what people are reading to an extent, and also has a good sense of what people are wanting. Um, Now, my only thing is well, the one thing I do like is, which is I don't think it's innovative. I think it's just smart. Is prior we had in the MCU we had Agents of Shield, right? I like the show. Some people don't like it, which is fair. It's your entitled to your opinion. But at some point, Agents of Shield got cut off from the MCU because they were like, "Oh, we're not going to connect this." He's like saying, you know what, our shows are going to connect into the universe, which is good because sometimes you're like, well, how come I'm watching this, but then I go to the movies and this is not, relevant or it's not connected. So I
Mhm.
think that's very smart because then it makes you like, okay, I actually got to pay attention to this show that's going to be coming out and these characters and everything. So um, that's how I feel about that.
Well, Agents of Shields was itself a victim of infighting and bickering. You had two heads of Marvel, and they couldn't agree on a lot of things, and they were going back and forth. One was experienced in television, the other one uh, more so in the other field. So what happened was is that the heads at Disney decided to separate their kids and give them their own toys to play with, and so you had Marvel TV, and then you had Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they went off and they played with their toys separately. So that's why Agents of Shields was separated out like that, and why they only alluded to what was going on in the MCU. And eventually, the guy played all of his cards and wound up being fired, and everything else wound up being folded back into the MCU, and now things are rolling and starting. They're trying to connect everything as much as possible. So you have characters in their shows winding up in the movies, and then things from the movies coming to the TV. But again, you still have that agenda-based programming, and so you wind up with things like She-Hulk. Um,
Oh Lord.
so they still have that issue there, and hopefully James Gunn saw that, and when he comes over to make his plans for TV, uh, they wind up being more in alignment with each other than what's happening there in Marvel, because Marvel is not having their at bat is good enough for the major leagues, but major leagues at bats don't have to be that good, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're
Uh,
saying.
so, you know, yet they satisfied a lot of fans with WandaVision, and they took shots at the fans with She-Hulk. Um, I think they played it safe with Miss Marvel and Loki. I don't know what they were doing with Loki. That was I
I
don't
enjoyed
know.
it. I think I enjoyed it. I think the Loki was, when I look back at it, I think Loki was the most driven sort of story, because you try to figure out who was running the strings, and it's finally leading up to the whole Kang dynasty, right?
Hmm.
So, but whereas Moon Knight felt more like it would appear that Moon Knight was more of a more of a mental awareness show, and I thought that was agenda driven a little bit. Um, I was disappointed. Personally, I think that show should have been a little bit more violent because of the nature of the character. And I don't mean as like a butcher, but I mean like more physical and more like he's not a he's not a finesse person, right? He's a more pound for pound. I'll take a punch. I won't dodge a punch sort of hero.
Yeah.
More anti-hero. Um, but the shows overall weren't that good. I have to say, when I look back at it, maybe maybe there was three if I really had to, like, had a someone had a gun to my head, but it's probably two shows that were good.
And I think they're running into an issue with the fact that uh, they're only 8 episodes for the most part, 6 to 8 episodes, and about
Correct.
half of those episodes on these, Marvel TV shows seem to be filler. So, they're not telling big enough stories for the time period that they're taking, but they're not telling as big a stories as you would see on network television. I mean, I come from a time where you would watch weekly television for, 13 weeks, 28 weeks, and see a show play out completely for that amount of time. And you know, to have somebody just watch 8 episodes of a show, that's a mini series. That's not a full on series, and to call it a series is ridiculous to me.
Right, and I believe Daredevil, one of the shows that they have planned for, I'm not sure, next year or the year after, is Daredevil Born Again is going to have 13 episodes.
Hmm.
So somebody must have been like, "Hey, guy, we can't do this in 6 and 8. Like, it's just not." Also, they lifted up the ratings. Remember, Marvel is a business. I mean, sorry, Disney is a business rather, and a lot of stuff was rated PG-13 because they're like, well, if I could bring my 13-year-olds, if they can bring their 13-year-olds, guess what? That's more money, right? So, but
Yeah.
then, but then eventually the fans spoke out, and when you see the other company, DC, even though they might have the best, when you see a show like Peacemaker comes out and is well, violent and funny, and still has a good story, they're like, you know what? Eventually, I spoke. I don't know if you've met Rogue Comics. I said, Mike, me and Mike both said eventually they have to realize the kids, the people that are now that watched Avengers when they were 12, they're probably in 18, 20 by now.
Hmm.
So who's this new crowd you're looking for? Because people grow up. And I think they finally realized, like, I believe the Blade movie is going to be, we have Deadpool is going to be rated mature. So more and more shows are going to be more mature because it's the nature of the character in the comic books, and that is important to keep the somewhat essence. Like, continuity is one thing, but if you can still have a Daredevil that's like beaten, broken, a little bit violent here and there. Um, you can keep the essence of the character.
Yeah, I think when they first put those on Netflix, there was sort of an unwritten promise that there would be a certain level of violence and gore allotted to these particular shows because they were street level heroes. You get down into the streets, you're dealing with regular criminals. They've got guns, they've got knives. The yakuza have swords. These people will draw blood in a heartbeat, and these are the heroes that fight them. You get Daredevil and the Punisher and Elektra, and these are some violent people, fighting violent people, and there's an unwritten promise that it's not going to be candy coated. And even in the comic books, they were not candy coated. Uh, when you do something like take Wolverine and put him into a cartoon series on Saturday morning, yes, you have to break that promise. And you have to make it for kids. But when you have your own streaming service and your ability to rate things and put them accordingly in different spots, uh, then you have the ability to continue that promise that you made when you allowed these shows to be made on a different platform. So I hope they do. I hope they follow that, and I hope that they do let them be who they were. Let the Punisher be the Punisher. Let the Kingpin be the Kingpin, and let Daredevil be Daredevil and fight the way he's supposed to.
Yeah, and I'm the whole list that um, Gunn put out. I was very. I think the one that caught me, which I don't know. Have you ever read The Authority? That was the one that caught my eye.
I have not read The Authority. No. What can you tell me about it?
Okay, so The Authority is basically, imagine a Justice League, but they think they can make the world better, and they're just they're just a better. I wouldn't say a better. Imagine a more Justice League. I wouldn't say violent either. They're just better in certain aspects. Uh, the Authority used to be a Dark Horse comic, and
Uh huh.
they got absorbed by DC. Sometimes in the mid early 2000s because they ended up being bought. Um, but that was the one group. The one character that sticks out to me is a guy named Midnighter.
Hmm.
He kind of looks like Batman in a sense, um, and his power is like basically he has like nanos, like he got injected with nanites, and like he can predict anything that you're about to do. He will predict it before you do it. He's seeing the outcomes before you can do it.
Uh huh.
So that's what I found interesting, and they have like their version of a Superman. So it's more of a. I'm trying to think of. It's like a Watchmen, but a little bit better. I think the group is going to be more relatable in a sense. Um, I don't want to spoil anything but Midnighter will either come out less woke to people, or he will be as if you read the comics, he'll be considered. You'd be like, okay, I know this thing, but the Authority is just basically was a Justice League kind of version with their kind of characters. So I'm excited to see what that group's gonna do.
Yeah, and they're able to do things with the Authority that they weren't able to do with the main three.
Correct.
So, and in that aspect, they're a lot like the Watchmen, in which case the Watchmen story was pitched for the regular DCU, but they liked the story. They just didn't want to commit their characters to doing that, as even in Elseworlds. So they decided to let them do that with other characters, which is why you have the comedian and Rorschach being analogous of other characters.
Right, and Doctor Manhattan as well,
Hmm.
for sure.
So I find it interesting that The Authority itself is going to be a movie, and most likely Superman will be in that movie as well because everything is supposed to be tied together. So what you have here is a almost a trilogy of Superman films, or at least with Kryptonian bases in them, because you have Superman Legacy as a film, The Authority as a film, and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And the only one that's got a release date is the Superman Legacy. So I love that all of the fan casters are out there casting young people to play Damian Wayne. When by the time they get to producing the film, whoever they cast is going to be way too old to be playing him at that time.
Right?
So, but Superman definitely is going to be the first to cast, I think.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to who they have. Like they said, it's going to be a younger Superman. Um, I'm I'm hoping and praying that this Superman doesn't try to break somebody's neck or punch or James Gunn's like I played Injustice, so I'm gonna have him punch somebody in the chest with his fist to stop him. To like
Well,
let's not hope not.
I think probably you're going to see Superman go through every version of Superman that they've already seen, because Superman was Zack Snyder's Superman, but not completely all the time, 100%. He was never always emo depressed about having to be Superman, not 100% of the time. He would go through those phases, but he always came back to himself. And himself is the aspirational figure. Not necessarily the reluctant Christ figure that James, not that James, Zack Snyder did, but he is the ideal aspect that everyone should aspire to be. Truth, justice, and the American way. So what you have here is Superman Legacy establishing truth, justice, and the American way. Most likely, the authority will have to be handled, and then he'll have to deal with the question of do I kill to be a hero, to stay a hero, or do I not kill to be the hero? In facing off with the authority, who definitely will kill to be the hero, because the authority is the exact opposite of what Superman would be, justice at all costs, where Superman's justice is tempered. He's never used 100% of his power unless he absolutely had to, and he never has to against human based foes. And then you have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, who is going to come to Earth slightly tainted based on her experience before coming to Earth. So that's going to be interesting to see how Superman then deals with a jaded version of himself and brings them around to uh, what would be a regular Supergirl uh, in their DCU.
The one that caught me off guard, and I think it probably caught you off guard too, was Swamp Thing. I I saw this, and he said that I believe that it's going to be it'll have horror um, tendencies in it, and I believe a little bit of mystical. I knew Swamp Thing was a part of DC. That's nothing new to me. I just didn't think of it as a movie. I thought that this would potentially be a show, because Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing back in the '90s was a show, and it lasted what 2 seasons, I believe. I'm not sure.
Um, I think they shot the full season one and then they canceled it and got rid of it before season one completed. DC had established their own streaming at that time, and this was before the amalgamation. And they were doing their own thing. They had their own streaming service, which was comic books, TV shows, and all of their back library. And then uh, James Woo, I think it was, directing it. Fast and the Furious guy, horror dude, was doing a great job establishing a horror version, the adult version of DC. And of course, the Titans were doing that as well at that time. And they got picked up by AT&T, and AT&T did what uh, Discovery is doing now. They pulled the plug on a lot of stuff. They amalgamated everything, and then they wound up pulling it together with everything else. And so this has happened before, and it was disrupted. And James Wu, whatever his name is, he left the project. Couldn't deal with the mess of too many cooks, and the whole thing falls apart and gets buried actually. And they don't have it on HBO Max either. The only way you can get it is by paying for it on sites like Vudu. So, you know, they did what Warner is doing now. A lot of the back catalog of HBO Max that they took off is going to show up on Tubi and on Roku. Uh, they're ad supported versions of streaming, which means that they license those out so that they could start making money. So that's an interesting thing to see. Um, and that's exactly what they did with the Swamp Thing, which is a shame because it just got completely buried, and they put a fantastic amount of production value into it. They were sticking with the horror theme, and I think James Gunn is probably trying to make up for that and bring it back because he saw the potential in what it could have been if they had stuck with it. And so I think the next movie that they have is the Batman: The Brave and the Bold.
Yeah, that's apparently getting a lot of controversy because they're like, well, how can you do Batman with Damian when there was Tim and Dick and Jason, and it's like folks, we don't know yet. He has to come out with a script. There's a reason why he's doing this. Also, take this with a grain of salt. We've seen Batman and Robin plenty of times. We've seen in the cartoons. They're just fast forwarding, I guess. Um, and I think it'll be interesting because, like you said, like you mentioned earlier, they're Matt Reeves. Their universe is always going to be their universe. So I mean, I'm sure Gunn's going to eventually have his Joker, but you know they don't want to do that just yet, right? So we're going to get introduced to Talia, probably Ra's al Ghul, maybe the Court of Owls. Um, so we're going to get different rogues, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
So that is good, and but people again, I think people are too caught up in the fact that there's no Dick Grayson or Tim Drake or well what have you. And it's like, well, there must have been a reason. Like Zaslav must have has to sign off on this stuff, right? Him and like
Yeah.
you said, all three of them have to sign off on this stuff. So they must have been like, okay, this has potential. And when's the last time we saw a Batman and Robin movie was what 2000 and what 1999 with
Yes. Yes.
Val Kilmer and I forgot his name.
One of the Chris's,
One of the Chris's, yeah, like
Chris
and
Pratt, Chris Pine, Chris something. Yeah.
Chris something, and then the second one was with the little ass Batman was um with Clooney and that same Robin. So
Hmm.
we haven't had a Batman and Robin movie in almost 20 plus years.
And that's the because they keep rebooting from the very beginning, and you have another Batman Begins, Batman Year One type of scenario. And since not Chris, since Matt Reeves is already doing that, essentially, starting with Batman on year two, basically, um, you don't really need to retread this. You want to go back and see how Batman started, you've got an infinite number of number one comic books to go back to because they've done that. Whether you go back as far as the original Batman who carried a gun, or you go back to the New 52, or you go back to whatever it is, you can always start with a Batman number one if you want to. But when he's doing Superman Legacy, with Superman already being Superman, and you start with Batman the Brave and the Bold, everything is already there, and it opens up this Pandora's box of possibilities. Um, what did happen to Dick Grayson? Is he Nightwing right now? Did they go through the entire Tim Drake thing? Is there a Joker that is sitting somewhere in Arkham Asylum after killing one of the Robins? Do we have a Red Hood? Um, which Batgirl is it? Is Barbara Gordon Oracle at this point? And did she have a relationship with Bruce before or after this point in time? The world is their oyster, and they can pick and choose what they like to bring out. And I commend them for reaching to the more obscure Robin. And I say it's a more obscure Robin, even though he's everywhere in the animations and in the comic books. But the mainstream does not know a sword wielding Robin who's willing to kill and has to be trained not to. The idea that Batman is reining in a smaller, more violent version of himself, who does have a father where he didn't, I think is a wonderful dynamic that they're probably going to try to explore. So,
Let's hope they don't kill off Batman.
well, that you know what, that would be interesting too if they took this opportunity to kill off Batman and let somebody else take the mantle, because there were other versions of Batman that stepped in when Bruce was unable to continue his work. So that might be kind of interesting as well. A little bait and switch there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So there's a lot of interesting things happening in the TV version. I mean, in the film version, but there's also a whole lot of television going on as well.
Oh yes. So the Booster Gold one I thought was funny when he explained it. The Creature Commandos look really interesting because if you notice, Weasel from Suicide Squad was on the team. So I wonder what's going to be the implications there. And I think Gunn realized with Waller, Viola Davis, that they have a great person that for Amanda Waller, and I can understand that. Like the thing is, you can learn more about the secret, I'm about to say Secret Six, the Suicide Squad. Why did she become this person that's so rigid and so like I don't care. I blow up an entire country to kill one villain. Um, the Lanterns one really caught my eye because they said it's going to be more like a space crime show, and it makes sense because of the Green Lanterns were a galactic police. So I thought that was a very interesting concept and how he presented it. Paradise Lost, I must have just blanked out because I totally forgot what that was about. So you'll have
Well,
to
he
fill me
called
on
that a
that.
Game of Thrones kind of
Oh yes,
show.
yeah, yeah, the Mascara. Yes, yes. Now it came back into my head. It's supposed to be like the Amazonians. So all of these shows are like. Oh, sorry. One second.
No, that's okay, because I think it's interesting that Paradise Lost winds up being a Game of Thrones kind of thing, which puts it in a different era than the other programs, where Waller and the Lanterns and possibly the Creature Commandos could be happening in the same time period. Because Waller, of course, you run across Waller in the Patriot TV show, or what was that the name
Peacemaker.
of it? Peacemaker.
Peacemaker.
There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you got Peacemaker in in his TV show. Waller was in the very beginning of that, and you had Peacemaker who was in the Suicide Squad, and of course you have Weasel in the Creature Commandos. So all of those essentially are happening within the same time period, and quite possibly the same time period as the films are going on as well. So there could be some crossover there. With Paradise Lost, you have a possibility of this not happening exactly right now in that same time period, but probably pre Wonder Woman time period before Diana is created out of a sack of mud. So, you have something that could be setting up a big bad from the past that arises again in the future that is able to tie in a Wonder Woman show or movie later on down the line. Now, this isn't the entire slate either. This is just what he calls part of phase one. So it's not even the full phase one of what they got planned. So I think it's going to be interesting to see.
Yes, and the thing about Booster Gold is, remember, the Blue Beetle movie is supposed to come out, so this makes complete sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if somehow in the production right now they try to like add like an end credit scene with Booster Gold, because remember, Booster Gold and Blue Beetle were a team for quite some time. Um, I'm not familiar with its history as other people, but I'm sure you could chime in on that. But I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because they're ending, like you said, they're finishing up the projects that were now, which is Blue Beetle, and they didn't cancel that movie. So Booster Gold makes complete sense to make it a show. So who knows if it's going to tie in the like, maybe there might be references or anything. So I thought that was really interesting. I like how they're basically, if you look at each shows, like Waller's a human, the Lanterns has to deal with space, the Creature Commandos is like mutations and science, and Booster Gold, he's from the future from what I was told, and there's the Mascara is more like, oh, the gods and mysticism. So you're getting a nice variety of different sort of genres in the comic book universe.
Hmm.
And that's also a good thing, because one thing I know that noticed in the MCU, and this is just me being truthful, is that a lot of the villains were very techy. Like, most of the villains were very tech based. It wasn't until Doctor Strange came along and Guardians that we got some space and a space and mysticism in the MCU. So this is nice to see that we're getting a variety of different things within said universe.
Oh, look at that at 10:16. I didn't pay attention. I'm sorry. Hey, Cole, how are you doing? I didn't see you there because we were talking so much about these cartoons and things. So, but yeah, I like the idea that Creature Commandos is going to be an animation and will somehow tie into the other stuff. And that whoever winds up being in the Creature Commandos cartoons, voicing those, will wind up actually acting as those characters in a live action version in one way or the other. And I think Booster Gold is probably our in the favorite, at least in my bracket, to be the one that Chris Pratt winds up playing.
Guardians is at its finale, so I could see. But I could see there's so many actors that could do it. So I'm not surprised on that one.
But I'm having a hard time picturing what the overall end is because I think he's leading towards a major bad guy like the MCU has with their Kang the Conqueror sort of thing.
Oh, for the last Guardians movie.
No, for his DC
Oh,
showdown,
oh,
because this is just part one. Part two will probably be wrapped around the entire DCU coming together to fight some big bad guy.
well, I think okay. So here's this is speculation. This is my own theory. I think for sure they're not going to do Dark Side, right? Because if they did that, then all the Snyder people would all of a sudden just try to find nukes and blow up Warner Brothers or whatever. So my suspicion is they would probably go with the next best thing, which is Brainiac. Brainiac is someone that has dealt with Kryptonians. He's dealt with Teen Titans in the future. He's dealt with many of the DC characters, and um, he's one he's a universal threat. So that's someone. Oh, even the Lanterns have dealt with them. So that's someone that I think, if you're looking for a big bad who's not Darkseid, who you think can start off your universe and has to band together, Brainiac comes to mind. I can't think of another, but he's the one that I think would best fit that role.
That actually makes sense. That makes a whole lot of sense because if Booster Gold coming from the future has some insight into what's going on, it would be because of a threat like that encompassed the entire world. And we know from the comic books that the um, which league is it? Uh, Brainiac is a threat in the future as well. So you can have Waller with her intel, the Lanterns with their experience in space. You got Supergirl, who may have dealt with him in her small version of Krypton in the outskirts of space, and Superman being, of course, his arch enemy at some point in time. And I think it makes sense that that would be the big threat for the entire community, TV and film to come together and battle against. That's a good thought. It's a good thought.
Yeah. So I mean, these shows look. Oh, and by the way, hey Sean. Cole, sorry. These shows look interesting to me. I think. I think out of all of them, the Lanterns is probably going to be the most anticipated for most people because let's be honest, the Ryan Reynolds movie was atrocious, and so everybody wants to finally see a good Green Lantern. We've been asking for a good Green Lantern on the screen, live action. So, and another thing that I thought of is what are the budgets going to be for these shows? You know, a lot of criticism the MCU got was the CGI wasn't good, the acting wasn't good. What are they going to do? Like, and also, how many episodes of these shows are they going to be? 10 episodes, 13, 8. This is all going to actually play a big factor, right? Because a common trend with the MCU shows was like it wasn't until say the last episode we saw like the big fight, right? The big
Yeah.
showdown. We got like a reveal, like let's say it was an 8 episode series. The fourth episode we would see who was the big reveal, and then the last episode would be like the main showdown. Maybe he might take a different approach. These are like a lot of unanswered questions that because you can't use a cheap budget for the lanterns. You just can't, right? Because of it's outer space, right? And the
Well, if they do it on
cosmos.
Earth, if they do it on Earth, then they could do it. So it just depends on how they do it. If it's a true crime and these guys are trying to figure out a problem that's happening here on Earth, like a secret invasion kind of a deal, then then you have that possibility of them doing something like that.
I mean, that's a good point.
Because there are like what was it with the Inhumans? Not the Inhumans. Yeah. Uh, yes. Was it the Inhumans?
Uh, in, refer-
Uh,
in regarding
the the
what?
Mar- the TV show that Marvel did with their space Game of Thrones, and it wound up not being anything because they wound up going to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah, that show's bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they did some stuff on the moon, and then they didn't stay on the moon. They wound up coming to Hawaii and hanging out, and then they got rid of Medusa's hair for budgetary reasons and tried to play it off as a plot device.
yeah, that was. If I don't mean to derail, I hope and pray they bring back the Inhumans somehow, because that's just an injustice that we don't have a Black Bolt right now. But that's for another time.
Yeah. I think they're going to try to work them back in, but they're going to try to avoid referencing the TV show at all. So when they brought him back and they killed him in Doctor Strange, he was not the same Black Bolt that was on the TV show. Dressed completely different, more comic accurate, and apparently easier to startle. so, um, but yeah, they're not going to put that back on TV at all ever. Yeah, that was one of the things that was forced into the timeline originally because of the two fighting heads, and that's why it was originally going to be a movie, and then it wasn't a movie. It wound up being a TV show because they separated the boys and their toys, and that got separated out. And then they gave him a dead Avenger or Shield agent to play with. the the agents of Shield worked that out, buddy. So it's it's good to see that a lot of that conflict is gone, and I hope they do bring back the Inhumans some kind of way. They were replaced with the Eternals in the timeline, and that didn't work out so well. I don't believe. I didn't really enjoy it. Um,
Neither did I.
Space robots with emotions. Hmm, no,
Space
wasn't good.
androids, yeah.
Yeah.
uh, well, it's one of those things where the whole that movie was like a is a plot device and set up for actually this phase apparently. So this upcoming phase. So
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes. And let's see. What about The Last of Us? Yeah, we're doing this on Sunday, so if you're watching the replay, you probably know what's going on. There's episode 4 is coming up now, and even though they did justice to the two characters and they expanded the universe the way they should have, and they gave us something that the video game could never give us. Um, they wound up doing it for, I think, the wrong reasons, agenda driven, and
oh
it's
yeah.
sad. It's sad to reduce that much creativity, that much love and care that was put into that episode, and that much actual real life enjoyable drama, and undermine it to say, haha, look, I tricked you into eating broccoli. That's just sad, I think. And it undermines the entire TV show.
Well, one thing that got me was the I wish the interactions between Bill and the girl, we don't really get to see that from the game. I am one of those people that I don't play. I don't have a console, but when I'm working, I watch the playthrough because it
Hmm.
passes. I work from home, and we don't get to see the interactions with Bill and the little girl and Joel, and that I understand why they did it. Again, I just wish my problem with just the overall landscape of media is they keep trying to make sure they insert, like you said, these agenda-driven narratives to 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 spark a conversation or to make sure they're like, okay, you know what, we got someone, we got your attention. You know what I mean? And I don't like that. I mean, overall, I understand the episode. I mean, I don't understand why people were like, "Oh my god, they're being woke." No, this it was implied that the character was this way. It wasn't. This isn't
Hmm.
anything new. Excuse me. So that I thought was silly. Um, did they need to spend 45 minutes, of, about their life? No. Maybe 20, maybe 20, 25, and then have some interactions with Joel and the girl. But I mean, that's how I think.
Cole says, "Oh, you talking about the Last of Us TV show? Yeah, I'm cool with people who enjoy it, but I really have not been enjoying it. Well, I'm glad you're still watching it anyway, because it's good to see an adaptation of a TV of a game done well and done right. And there's an argument to be made that episode 3 was filler. But there's also an argument to be made that TV can't just be a straight up adaptation of a game, and that you have to make adjustments one way or the other to make it work in the medium that you have. I've got I got a book out uh, called "The Grim Tales of Rainbow Falls." It's available on Amazon.com. That book is an adaptation of some screenplays that I had written for a web series 100 years ago, and that never got produced. But changes had to be made in order for that to be a novel, and certain plot lines had to be reduced, and others had to be increased to make it work. I'm also adapting that into a comic book, and that is also having changes as well. So it's being changed left and right, so that it could work in the medium that it's at. That being said, you undermine yourself when you come back and say, "Ha ha, this is the reason why I did it, and I fooled you into watching something you wouldn't normally watch." So um, it takes away from it, I think.
Um, and you did bring up a good point, Cole. I mean, let's be honest. The Last of Us is a very long game to play. I think these characters could have been introduced way later,
Hmm.
and we could have gotten more interactions. I don't know why the directors took it upon themselves to introduce them so early and then get rid of them so quick. Um, so that's my per se on it. But I mean, how can we? I mean, at least The Last of Us can be the bridge to start having, say, better quality adaptations of video games, because I think Hitman wasn't that great.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think. Prince of Persia, that was another one. That was another video game that didn't turn out too great. I don't know if you can. I don't know if I'm sure I'm missing others. I mean, Resident
The first
Evil
Super
was.
Mario Brothers.
The first. For its time, it was okay. I would say, right? Resident Evil. I guess the first two were good. I mean, because not my head. Uh, I agree. The speed running. I think that, like, The Last of Us. Honestly, The Last of Us can basically be Walking Dead. They could have that many seasons. That's how much material they have, right? So I definitely agree with that. Um, but with that being said, I don't know. Oh yes, the I hope that this can be the bridge for another company, whether that's Netflix or Hulu or whatever, they can grab a video game and maybe they'll do a better interpretation. Maybe we might get so. Yes, this might be bad right now and not the best for some people, but maybe we might get something better because right now entertainment is kind of stale outside of a comic book movie. There are original films, but a lot of the video games are actually really interesting and have some cool stories, and it'd be nice to see them live action as well too. So that's my take on it.
I don't think I've ever seen Ace Attorney, so I wouldn't know if that's how you do a video game adaptation or not. You ever seen that, Warren?
This is news to me. Never seen it. Never even heard
No.
of it.
All right, so that's a total miss there, Cole. But he did have something to say earlier that I found interesting. He would have preferred to have seen a Batman '89 style first film in the DCU. And it would be hard outside of the lousy camera works by Matt Reeves, boo, to be better than the Batman. So that's my least favorite out of them. The idea of jumping from one time period to another would be kind of interesting, but then it makes things kind of complicated. And Batman '89, that Gotham City was very, very Tim Burton esque and outside of any other reality that they had there. There's no Superman in that Batman world, I don't believe. And if there is, the they would not be friends or anything. I don't think, because that Batman lived in a very comic book styled world because they were trying to make a comic book movie at the time, not trying to make a gritty reality based one. They were just trying to not be Adam West Batman. But it did make it possible for all the other movies to happen. So, did you hear about the that Amazon is making Tomb Raider?
No, that this is news to me. I I don't know how I feel about that because what was it? Didn't Angelina Jolie? Didn't she play Tomb Raider
Yeah,
way back in the day?
way back in the day, and then Alicia Vikander did Tomb Raider as well. Uh, so, it didn't do as well as they wanted it to, so there was never a follow up on that. But it says here on Forbes, the 2018 adventure movie Tomb Raider made an estimated profit of 39.6 million according to analysis documents filed by Amazon, which is understood to be reviving the franchise with a new film and television series scripted by Emmy award-winning writer Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And that's where I stop reading. Okay.
Oh,
So Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the one who's taking over the Indiana Jones franchise as the new lead. And she had a show on Amazon called Fleabag, which won all kinds of awards for whatever reason I don't know. So, yeah, it sounds like Amazon is continuing its trend of killing franchises left and right.
that's that's not a franchise I was expecting to be revitalized. I did hear. I'm sure maybe you can confirm this. I know that there's currently in talks about a God of War series um being produced. I don't know if Cole. I remember. I think I saw something about it that they're trying to. I'm not sure if it's on Amazon or Hulu, but one of them is wants to do God of War as a series, um, which would be interesting because that's a very good game as well. But Tomb Raider is not. I just don't think Tomb Raider can compete right now, in my
I don't
honest opinion.
I don't understand how they would make a cinematic universe out of that. I mean, she's one treasure hunter.
Right. And when you have a show like National Treasure on Disney Plus too, it's like, well, okay.
Now you've got competing women looking for treasure. You know, two series about gold digging women, I don't think is a good idea.
I, I, yeah, I don't
Don't
really
don't
think
want to
that.
touch that one, do you? Yeah.
I, it's just, I just, I mean, now this goes back to what you said earlier about agendas. Is it because that she's a strong treasure hunting woman? So we're like, okay, we got a gold mine here with everything that's happening in the world, blah blah blah. I mean,
Well, you got to commend Amazon for at least starting with the correct base. They didn't take a male and turn him into a female and write the story that way. They took the strong female who was written as a strong female and are building the story around that. They did that with Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings thing, although they they took a strong female and turned her into a brat, which was, I think, the wrong thing to do. So, who knows how this is going to work out? I wish the best for them. I know a lot of people are going to get paid for this and get involved, and I hope it lasts more than 1 or 2 seasons so that people can be employed. I always like it when creative people are employed. So, best of luck to you, Amazon. But well, I want to know more about this God of War thing. Who's picking that up? Who's doing that?
I had it appeared on my Twitter feed. I know Cole probably seen it too. It appeared on my Twitter feed, and it was the guy that's the guy who voices the Stargate black actor that voices the character of for the main character for God of War. It was brought up last year, and it was brought up again, and I saw it, and I think it was Amazon, or I think it was Amazon, but yeah, basically they were in talks about a God of War. Yeah, um, about it in an early stage. It's like, oh, okay, this would be good. I mean, I love the game. I love watching the gameplay. Again, I don't play console, but I like watching the stuff because it's. I mean, let's be honest. Video game playthroughs are basically like watching a movie at this point. So, um, it this franchise has um not disappoint. So that's all I had read. But this was back like in December, January, I think, and
Hmm.
I have very little information on it, to be very honest with you. So
It says here that Amazon Prime God of War series, like The Last of Us HBO show, will retain the video game franchise values while expanding it in such a way that those who aren't familiar with the game will still be able to enjoy the show. At least that's what Sony Pictures TV Studios president Catherine Pope has promised. MSK, take notes. God of War TV series is in the early stages. Pope told Deadline that Amazon's God of War show is still in the early stages of production, so don't expect it to release until the end of next year, at least, the very least, yeah. That said, Pope is impressed by the work that's been done so far and said that the team is hard at work on building and expanding the world for the TV series. I'm so impressed with what they're already doing in terms of building out that world and expanding, keeping all the values of the game but also expanding it so that if you don't know the game, it's still going to be a really satisfying show on its own, Pope said. I think people somehow think it's an easier job to develop IP. In many ways, it's harder than coming up with an original idea. If the production values are anything like HBO's The Last of Us, fans are in for a treat. Well, that's a nice little fluffy article.
well, yeah, that's definitely kind of trying to bolster. Someone got paid off a little bit, but I mean that's a good sign. I mean, have you uh watched any of God of War games? Played any? I've never played it. I've only watched my friends play it. So
I have not played it at all. I try to keep up with the news about different things like that, but I've never, no, no. Right now, I have two sons of varying ages, and we have two consoles, and they occupy them both. So one's got the PlayStation, the other one's got the Xbox, and I get to be nowhere near them. So I don't get to
understandable.
play games. People saying to put Jonathan Majors in the role are dumb. LMAO. He's not a live action actor. He tried it before and failed miserably. Give it to somebody else. Who is Jonathan Majors?
Jonathan Majors will be playing Kang the Conqueror in Quantum Mania.
And he's not a live action actor?
Uh, I, I'm not sure if you meant to say series actor because the last thing that I saw him was in Lovecraft on HBO. So maybe he was implying that. Um, I don't know how to take that context to be quite honest. Uh, oh, you meant Christopher Judge. Christopher, yeah, yes, I agree with that. Christopher Judge is not because if you watch Stargate, that wasn't the best. So yes, yes, you're absolutely right. I watched Stargate. Yeah, totally understand. But yeah, Christopher Judge isn't the best. Like his revitalization of God of War has definitely put us back on the map with his voice acting.
I don't know Christopher Judge. That sounds like the guy who did King of the Hill. Is that right or is that wrong?
Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Okay, so yeah, the guy who did King of the Hill is definitely not front of the camera material either. So we'll just ignore that, Cole, and it's hard to keep up with multiple streams. But yeah, I think there are plenty of actors that are out there that could probably take on the role. There's a guy who's a wrestler who is going to be playing the role of Bruiser Brody in a film based on the whole Von Erich thing that happened out of Texas. And he might be a good choice for that if he's doing actual acting as well. So, I don't know the guy's name, and I don't have a picture of him up, but it'll be interesting to see if they can find somebody big enough in real life to fill out the role of Kratos. I would watch some commentary walkthroughs of games like God of War in 2018, Spider-Man, etc. If you're not able to play them yourself on those consoles, oh, okay. So yeah, I can watch other people play.
Yeah, I mean that's what I did. I've watched a lot of playthroughs. I've watched the Spider-Man playthrough. The one, not the one with the Miles Morales, the one before it, and it's like you're watching a movie. So I mean, and there's no pauses and depending on who you watch because they do one straight playthrough.
Hmm.
But it's nice and it's like watching a series. So that's the way I look at it.
I think I saw some of the Arkham Batman video game walkthroughs at some point, or at least the a collection of the cutscenes, so that I could get the story of what they were trying to do. But if you've got any walkthroughs that you think I should probably watch, put them in the comments below. Look at that! I sound like a YouTuber.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, those two that he mentioned are good. Uh, any I can look up some others. But those two that he mentions are a good start, honestly.
And let's see. Is there anything else that we should cover real quick while we're here?
Um, Only thing that I can think of is within the next, I guess, start getting your tickets for Quantum Mania. It's literally 12 days away. Uh, yeah, that's all I can. That's all I can think of. Thinking of. Oh, I can't remember. A show is supposed to be starting soon again. Uh, it just lost me. I can't think of it. But yeah, only Quantum Mania. That's all I can think of right now. That's happening in 2 weeks.
I don't know if it would be good as a walkthrough watches, but I think Alan Wake, Quantum Break, and Control by Remedy games are some pretty underrated ones with great stories. I'll have a look at that. Thanks for the recommendation. Quantum Mania, I think, is going to surprise some people. I think there's some story elements that we haven't seen. We don't know to look for them like we did in the Spider Man trailers. We knew to look for the extra spaces for the alternate world Peters. Uh, there are some things probably that we're missing in the Quantumania trailers that we just don't know to look forward to. So expect some big surprises. Expect some people to come out this week with their reviews saying that they weren't ready for something. Um, and for begging people not to release or to put it out there, whatever that is. And I expect a lot of fun dialogue in the next couple of weeks about Quantum Mania because I think there's something in there that we just don't know about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think people are overreacting when they said, I mean, I'm sure you saw on Twitter how people were like, "Oh, the second trailer showed too much," and it's a 2 hour and I think 15 or 40 minute movie
Hmm.
duration. I'm sure that we're gonna see a lot of story, a lot of um, connecting pieces from, say, the first Ant Man that weren't the first and the second Ant Man that weren't answered, and we're gonna get answers to that, and we're gonna get introduced to a lot of new characters, and I'm sure the end credit scene is gonna be something that people are gonna be like, oh, so like, there's this like I mentioned previously to other people, they have to make sure that this movie does good. The last phase was horrible. Like, I'm not gonna be a white knight and say it was the best phase. It was horrible. Like it was downright mediocre. Okay, horrible's rough, but mediocre at best. So they have to make sure they do this. Why? Like, I don't know if you're on. I don't know if you use Twitch often, but I can't tell you how many ads I see for Quantumini on YouTube. I'm sure on the Super Bowl they're gonna show something different. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay because we're on Twitch right now, actually, and I don't think I've got any advertisements going. But if they do, I hope they're good. Um, yeah, the last phase was underwhelming, and I just got to say this real quick. If you're still sore about Edgar Wright and you're boycotting that because of that, you're just as bad as the Snyder fans you critique. So you got no leg to stand on there, Cole, when it comes to critiquing the Snyder fans. Do the same as them. Get over it, dude, and get back on the train, and you might find that you enjoy something uh, for a change. You know, don't hold on to the hatred. Let it go. Be free. But I think that more people are going to be satisfied than not with Quantum Mania. I think it's going to profit, and I think they're going to probably kill off Ant Man. So you might want to tune in, Cole, to see that. You
I
know.
don't. I don't think. I don't think Ant Man's going to die. I think someone else is going to die.
Oh, I think he has to so that Cassie can continue on to her final form. She needs to evolve. Unlike Pikachu, she can't stay the same.
I don't know, man. Like, I know people are like again, it's one of those things where we saw the trailer, and my my guesstimations is either, a couple things can happen when a villain in a movie kills someone, right? You can
Hmm.
kill the hero off, but then that inspires everybody, right? But
Yeah.
then but when the hero kills like a daughter, or like say he killed like Janet, or like let's say he killed Janet, right? That would be devastating to Scott, right? Because he kind of has an interest in her and all this stuff, or even Hank. So I think someone's going to die, but I don't think it's going to be Ant Man, because they're going to need him for the next phase. I'm just excited to see characters like MODOK, because I feel like he's an interesting character. Um, I believe they hinted at it. Oh, this is just theory, so I'm not going to get into that. But I'm
No, no, no.
excited.
Let's go ahead and let's jump on the speculation train here,
Um,
and figure out what's going to happen, and ruin everybody's day if it happens to be right.
uh,
With
speculate the
I'm
speculate.
sorry.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that with Modoc being there, and Modoc being Kang's number one assassin, that leads me to think that he might be successful in getting revenge on Scott Lang, who trapped him there in the first place, and made him become Mr. Captain Bighead. And I think it's not unreasonable to believe that the Scott Lang that winds up finishing out the film is not the Scott Lang that went down there in the first place. I think he can kill that Scott Lang and others and have a different Scott Lang from a different timeline finish the show, which could cause a whole lot more drama. Does Cassie still treat her dad like her dad because it is her dad from another timeline, but it's not the dad that she went into the story with? I think there's a lot to play with there.
Oh, I was gonna say that the speculation is that from the first Ant Man, that it's Darren Cross, um, the Yellow
Yellow
Jacket,
Jacket.
yeah, and that he got sucked into that universe. Um, so that's a very interesting theory that I've seen, and by looking at when they did the still on his face, it's like, okay, I can see where you're coming from. Um, one thing that I noticed that Jonathan Majors had mentioned in an article is he said he wanted Kang to be as human as possible. So I don't know what that means. Maybe you can give me, because what the way I read that was that I guess Thanos was just too um benevolent. I guess I'm sure I'm using the wrong word, but you get what I'm trying to say.
I think what Jonathan Majors brings to it is a great deal of depth to the character. When he played a version of Kang in Loki season one, um, he went into it knowing and expecting what was going to happen to him, because he himself directed it to happen. And I think the war that he spoke about with the Kangs is the war that has yet to come. And I think that's what we're building up to, is that war of Kangs. So one of these Kangs that we will wind up seeing from here on out, be it the Beholder or any other version of Kang, is going to be the one who wins out and winds up being he who remains at the end of time. So it'll be interesting to see how he's able to pull off all of these variations of character uh, in that particular role. Obviously, Kang is the hero of his own story, because he needs Scott's help to achieve a goal, and that goal might be to undo what has already happened, which is put everything back the way it was. Uh, so who knows?
Yeah, and I I think people. I hope the people don't do the unfair comparisons of Thanos and Kang. First of all, we didn't get Thanos till what, 8 years later.
Yeah,
we're getting Kang in the first movie. To start it off, I think that's already a good sign because it gets kind of like what's the word to say? It's just dragging it on. Like, oh man, I finally want to see Thanos. I finally want. When we do, it's like, man, why didn't you put him in say Guardians and have him he beat the Guardians' butt and then they ran away from him or something like that? You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I'm interested for that. Speaking of, you said to mention one last thing. Um, we also have Guardians coming out this year as well. And we also have, I believe, the Marvels coming out this year. So that's the last two movies for this year. So I'm not too thrilled about the Marvels. I do want to see the ending of Guardians because I think that was a good group, and I want to see how it all ends. But I'm not too thrilled for the Marvels, to be quite honest with you.
I think at the end of Guardians, they all die.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And the Marvels, I'm really interested to see exactly what it is that they're doing, and why they're being ping ponged back and forth between uh, space time. Um, Apparently, they're changing places with each other, or they're changing, Freaky Friday style, where they're changing places with each other in each other's bodies or something. And how that works into the quantum realm and everything else is going to be interesting to see, because the gauntlets seem to be the same technology as the 10 rings, and the 10 rings seem to be the same technology as the what Kang is using in the quantum realm. So those strings have to be tied at the end and pulled together to make something, and that is probably the only reason I would go see it if I go see it. But I'll probably wait until it comes on streaming myself.
That's understandable. And I don't like Brie Larson, so yeah.
Yeah, she's not doing a good job of presenting herself, I don't think. Probably got a good heart, though. Who knows? Well, let's see. It's we've been at this for about an hour and a half, so I think we've got a good point to come to a close. Any last words?
Um, for anyone, this is just me. I say to anyone that's a Snyder fan, that's not a fanatic or a zealot, just give James Gunn a chance before you come to drastic conclusions. Um, you know, there's been many instances where, uh, take for instance, Heath Ledger being casted as the Joker. That was scoffed at, and look how that turned out. Rest in peace to him. So all I'm saying to anyone out there that is a Snyder fan, give the direction a chance, and let's see how it turns out. That's really all I have to say.
I think everybody is unfair to anyone who is cast as the Joker, except for maybe Caesar Romero, because nobody knew anything about it when he took the role. But Jack Nicholson, there was a lot of heat for him taking the role as the Joker. One, how could he degrade himself for such a role? And then two, he was terribly miscast as the role. That was the thought. The same thing with Heath Ledger, and then he knocked it out the park. And the same thing happened with Jared Leto, and they were right. And now you got this new guy who was cast as the Joker for Matt Reeves, and there's just not enough to make a judgment on that one. So anyone who's going to be playing the Joker is going to be scrutinized and torn apart and picked at. But you're right about giving James Gunn a chance. If you're not willing to give him a chance, spend most of your time pushing up Rebel Moon and propping that up. Act positively in life, and positivity will come back to you. So go out there and spread the good news about Zack Snyder's upcoming works. He's moved on to new things, and you guys should too, because the Snyderverse will always be there on DVD and streaming. So, with that, guys, go out and make it a great day. And we will catch you next time. Thanks for being here, Warren.
Oh, thank you.